am compelled by shock. I am compelled by shock. I am compelled
Well, we are returning to the Schlock-ocalypse, this time in Mesoamerica. What is up, everybody? I am Darby Ellis Lewis Wilson. This is Chris Anonymous, and we are your hosts for the show. We are talking about the 2006 flick, Mel Gibson flick, Apocalypto. What's up, Chris? Chris, I think you're muted. Still muted, buddy.
How about now?
Oh, man, there you are. Happy 4th of July, buddy.
Happy 4th of July. If you read my lips, that's what I said to you.
Oh,
I'm a little surprised that you chose Apocalypto when you could have chosen a holiday themed movie.
you don't know how bad I feel about that. I'm a very patriotic person, and I've been thinking about it. Apocalypto, let me see if I can spin this. Apocalypto is the perfect 4th of July movie because it is about an oppressive, excessive government lording over people and a person trying to escape it to freedom. Okay. Apocalypto, happy Independence Day from Central America.
Okay, yeah, yep. I buy it.
So anyway, roundabout way. Thanks for watching, everybody. So yeah, this movie came out in 2006. It's a Mel Gibson flick. It was about 3 years after his last picture, which was Passion of the Christ. And then he wouldn't really direct a movie again. I think he did maybe some series in this time, but he wouldn't really direct a movie again until I think like 10 years later in 2016 with Hacksaw Ridge, which is also a very awesome movie. I cried. I did cry. Mel Gibson, I believe around this time, he was going off the deep end. But man, the guy can direct a movie.
Yeah, he hasn't directed a lot, but he hasn't directed a bad movie. I mean, Man Without a Face is just good, and then he follows that up with Braveheart, and bam, it's been up.
Yeah. So, and surprisingly, the reason I picked this movie is because, I mean, I believe and I think that you're sort of on the same page that this movie is awesome. I love this movie, but the reason I picked it is not because it's particularly schlocky or bad. It's because it doesn't really get a whole lot of love. It costs about $40 million to make. Worldwide, it made $120 million. So it was successful worldwide. However, in the US, it only made about $50 million. So it just made $10 million past its budget. Usually if a movie can make its budget back, or at least double its budget, then it's considered a success. So in the US, it didn't do very well. The critic scores for it, they're pretty middle of the road, a little better than average. But the thing is that like I never really hear anybody talk about Apocalypto. Like no one's ever like, this is a movie you got to see. This is a must-watch movie. And in my book, it's absolutely a must-watch movie. So that's why I've been chomping at the bit to try and get to it while we have this platform.
Yeah, I'm excited to see all you have to say about it.
So yeah, I mean, I feel like it's our duty to do something about it because there's really not a lot of commentary out there about it. Again, it might be because Mel Gibson was in the dark days of his life, I think, when this movie came out. And so maybe people just have kind of a sour taste in their mouth because of that. But there's just like a lot of unfavorable criticism around the movie. Like looking for other YouTube reviews. There's one by a channel I won't name, but it basically spends like half an hour talking about like how racist the movie is, and because it's historically inaccurate, and there's just a lot of beef with the historicity of the movie in itself, which I'd like to talk about later. But yeah, I think this movie deserves its just due. It's interesting that this movie, it is not considered a foreign film. I think that's pretty wild. So if you've all seen it, you know that it's in a different language. It's in the Mayan language, Mayan dialect, I think. I'm not sure if it's modern Mayan. Do you know?
I do not. It is not in English.
It is not in English. And I just find it interesting that it's like not considered a foreign film. And I always consider like one-to-one, if you have to read the movie, it's a foreign film.
Yeah, but I mean, there's lots of Australian and British movies that you don't have to read, but they're foreign films.
We've done a few foreign films. Bad taste.
And this is financed by an American company, so it's it's not to me it's not a foreign film, even though it's in another language.
Yeah. The guy's Australian, Mel Gibson.
This crosses all borders.
It's a Universal movie.
It's a Universal movie, although I don't think it was Universal.
So the way we do the show is we talk about what's good and what's bad about the movie, and then we talk about the schlock, just kind of what are these movies about? Like what's going on in these movies? And that's the part I'm really excited to get to. Before we do that, we like to talk about the web of schlock. Like how is this movie connected to other movies or actors? Chris, what do you got for us in the web of schlock?
Again, we've noticed a lot that some movies are connected in many ways and some feel very isolated. And this one feels very isolated by choice. A lot of these actors, this was their first or only thing. A lot of them went on to do some TV, some small roles here and there, but nothing really stands out in a very giant way, except for the director, obviously.
Mm-hmm. So I was looking up some of the IMDb credits of the main actors, and it seems like to say that they weren't actors prior may be a little offensive.
No, a lot of the main ones were, but a lot of the like small parts were like people who had never acted before. Yeah, no. I mean, I'm not saying that the main actors weren't actors before.
They didn't know what they were doing.
Right. No, they totally were awesome in it. And they knew what they were doing. But like a lot of the small roles were filled out with locals who might not have ever acted before. And I mean, a lot of these actors, even though they were established, this was a jumping off point, it feels like, for various TV roles and different things like that.
Yeah. So, well, let's jump right into good, bad, and schlock. Before we go any further, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe wherever you're watching. Hopefully you're watching this potentially on YouTube. So give our channel a subscribe, because that really helps us grow and we can do more of this stuff. And also be warned, we're going to spoil this movie and many other movies. This is not a spoiler-free channel. So Chris, hit me up with your good and your bad.
All right. Good. I love the action. I love the pacing. I love that it feels like a kind of a larger than life folktale.
Yeah.
And then bad. You could also talk about some of the folktale nature where it's a lot of happenstance and possibly fatalistic, where it's like he's not really making a lot of choices through a chunk of the movie, which could be good and could be bad, something we can discuss. I wanted more of the B story. I thought that was underdeveloped with when she was down in the big hole,
the pit.
The pit. And then, I didn't realize it, and maybe my tastes have just changed, but there was a tad too much slow motion for me.
Yeah. I think that's maybe when people just discovered that they could do slow motion easily with digital film.
Right. So that's my good and bad. What do you got?
So my good, I got a long good list, a very short bad list. So obviously I kind of mentioned it earlier. The directing, I think the directing in this movie is fabulous. I think just the way this movie was put together is fabulous. You'll notice, I think in general, so this movie is a pretty like straightforward story, more or less, because beginning of the movie, once they get captured, they move from let's see, the left. They move from left to right, more or less, on the screen, and then once they escape and he's returning to the jungle, they're oriented more right to left. So they're going one way, and then they turn around and go back. Yeah, Snowpiercer does this where they're always progressing forward. Mad Max does this really well when they're going away from the Citadel and they're coming back from the Citadel. Avatar does it during the final fight sequence. Like, I think the bad guys are always progressing left to right and the good guys are always progressing right to left. And so it just does for a movie, right, where it's probably a large English speaking audience, or at the very least an audience that doesn't speak the language spoken in the movie. You can visually tell what's going on without catching all of the dialogue. You can get the broad strokes of the movie and more or less get what's happening. And I have to give props to that for directing, and also just the detail in the movie, especially once they get into the Mayan city. Is, to me, it's just like every single thing there. Every shot has a purpose. Like everything that you see, like from the fat little kid to like the way people are dressed to like how they're reacting to things. When they're walking up the pyramid and you see like the heads rolling in the background, like just everything has something that adds to the story. And I think that is just brilliant. And that is one of the main reasons I love this film. And that being said, like, I've just never seen anything like this movie before. Like, how many movies, and there might be some more since then, but how many movies depict like that part of the world roughly around that time period at that scale? Like, I've never seen like active Mayan pyramids.
It took someone at the top of their game who had a lot of pull to get that made.
Right.
Because I mean, you talked about how it didn't do a lot of money. I mean, 50 million is a lot, but not as what they wanted in the United States. And I mean, a lot of it has to be a language barrier. And that's really cool that they stuck to their guns and chose to do it in an authentic language, because you don't see epics like that. And there are a lot of great stories out there that I think don't get told because of language barriers. And it's cool that they stuck to their guns and did it in that language. I thought that was really cool. And you don't see that a lot.
Yeah. So basically a lot of my good has to go with the directing and just the way this movie was put together. It's tense, it's emotional. But I also think the story is really great. I think that there's a feast of themes to really latch onto, and we can talk about it later, but there's just a lot of things going on in this movie to make you think about it afterwards. And finally, I got to give it up to the makeup department. Just the stretched earlobes and the piercings and things like that, the scarification, I think just looks amazing. Like I would never have guessed that those people didn't actually have like stretched earlobes. Like I think it, when we think of special effects makeup, we think of like rotting zombies and things like that, but we don't think of like such subtle things like just, maybe a piercing or something. And I thought that was fabulous. The costuming, the makeup was just amazing in this movie. My bad for the movie, I only have 3. I feel like Jaguar Paw, the main character, by the end, I feel like he had too many wounds. Like after he gets shot in the heart, I'm like, this dude, like he can't live, he can't survive. And I think it does an injustice when they show the first part in the movie, the guy that he's on the stick with behind him, he's cut in the side similarly, and he can't make the journey, right? It's just too hard on him. Jaguar Pa has a similar cut. Also, I mean, he's fatigued. He's been through hell. Then he gets shot in the heart. How is this dude alive? Blunted's Revenge. That's the guy that couldn't have kids, who they made fun of at the beginning. Boy, just a sad story. And there's the part where he's talking about, like, before he dies, he's going to try and take as many of those guys with him as possible. And he doesn't get his revenge. And man, like, I understand why. I mean, this movie is a long, hard road to travel. Like this movie just really doesn't let up very much. Like, there's some levity in the beginning, but past that, man, it is just tense and sad all the way to the end. But even because of that, and this is my third bad thing, the ending, I feel like, is maybe abrupt isn't the right word, but it's just a little too short for all of the misfortune that Jaguar Pa goes through and his people go through. Like, just showing that they survived and that they're moving on, like, just maybe wasn't enough for me. Again, I don't know if it would be better if they had more, but I'm sitting there wondering, like, one of the saddest parts of the movie is when the kids have to stay at the river and the little girl is yelling, "I'll take care of them. I'll raise them."
Right.
Well,
where did they go?
Yeah. Could they, maybe if they had just shown those kids following, like, maybe that would have satisfied me some more, but I felt like the end was just a little too short from such a long, hard row of terrible happenings. So that is my good and bad for this movie. Hopefully we have enough time to really get into talking about some themes of this movie. But first, I'd like to address here are like kind of the three main criticisms of the movie that I saw, just looking things up. And they all kind of go along the same lines about the historicity of the movie. So a big criticism is that it is historically inaccurate. Like, the Mayan people at this time, like, weren't making sacrifices, or at the very least not to that extent, or it may have been the Aztecs, or maybe they put in like aspects of Aztec culture into the Mayan culture, and things like that. The Spanish, they didn't show up at this time, or they showed up before, or something like that. It's just kind of there's just a lot of incorrect things in it in history, and therefore it is like a caricature of these people, and therefore racist. And I think that is totally wrong and missing the point of it, because it's not supposed to be like an accurate history of what happened there. It is a condensed history of like what makes it telling the overall story of what makes civilizations fall. And if you want to look at any of Mel Gibson's other movies, Passion of the Christ, Braveheart, right, they're not incredibly historically accurate for like what's going on at the time. And it's because the main focus is on the story that like took place in this time in history, right? So if Braveheart wasn't historically accurate, and it puts story over accuracy, I don't think that it's fair to judge this movie by it not being historically accurate. And the other thing, they kind of follow along the Mayan language. So the tribes people, they're speaking the Mayan language, and they're saying that like if these people spoke the same language, like they would have known about like the large Mayan society, and that like it just doesn't track. But I think that it's completely plausible that like these people, maybe they don't speak the same language as each other, but speak like a dialect of the language, and they're just so spread out.
How many movies exist where like the bad guys are Russians or Germans or something, and they're in that country and they're speaking English with a accent, and that's what we get.
Right. Yeah,
right?
Exactly. So
like, I mean, I understand the need for historical accuracy and to do justice to civilizations and and different groups, but it's also a movie that has to take certain liberties. Like,
Yeah. It's about themes. It's about
Yeah.
archetypes. And so the third criticism I'll address kind of flows from that one. The idea that this huge Mayan city is like 2 days journey away from their tribe, and like how unbelievable that is that they wouldn't know about each other. And right. So again, they're just caricatures. But the thing is that like, if those people, if they had everything that they needed, like in their, say like 2 mile radius, or, you know, whatever their radius was,
right.
and they had like this big geographical barrier of the river, why would they go past that? And why would they bother to find out stuff that like might be potentially dangerous to them? And furthermore, there are like to this day, like isolated tribes, like I think like in South America, like that don't really have contact with you know, modern societies.
Yeah. So to kind of get into schlock, and I'll do my little point, and then I would love to let you just take over and talk about everything you want to talk about. So again, we talk about how movies teach you to watch movies, right? And there's a scene where there's an elder in the tribe who's telling a story about fear, right? And about,
I think we have a picture of that, the storyteller.
Okay, and it's a tall tale. It's a folk tale, right? It's larger than life, and there's happenstance, like all folk tales and fairy tales and oral stories that are passed down to not necessarily teach a lesson, but to maybe illuminate a theme or something in life that's important. This is a giant folk tale. So everything, all those criticisms, sure, you can have those criticisms, but also he's saved by the Deus Machina of the Spanish ships arriving just in the nick of time. That's pretty wild. That doesn't make any sense. He's saved just in time when the eclipse happens. That's not plausible. That doesn't make sense. He survives these wounds that other people don't survive. This is a story of a hero that is passed down from generation to generation, and someone is telling this story to a group of people, and they're embellishing like you do. All great.
That's a great point.
All these stories. So this is a wildly inaccurate movie. It's hyperbole at its best. It's supposed to be exaggerated. That's how these stories are passed down.
So I think maybe the reason I love this movie so much is because of the way the story revealed itself to me. So I didn't really know anything about this movie going into it when I saw it in the theater. I hadn't seen any of the previews for it. I knew like Apocalypto, it's about the apocalypse, has something to do with like, I assume maybe like the Mayan calendar or something like that, right? So I didn't really know what I was in for. And as the movie progressed, you start with like kind of this happy family tribe where they're ribbing each other. And then this horrible thing happens to them where they're pillaged and they're taken as slaves, and they're marched essentially on this death march. But you see the landscape change, right? They cross this river into like essentially a new world, and a tree falls, and you see that the earth is starting to be ravaged, right? The trees are starting to be cut down. And then from there, they're like digging into the earth. They're like mining stuff out of it to create, to create cement, I believe. And then they go from that to like, what are they using all these trees and cements for? Oh, and they're also seeing dead crops. But then they see, oh, here's what it's for. And it's these ginormous structures, right? They were living in like huts, like grass tree-made huts, and they're just these giant stone structures. And I was just imagining, like, what would it be like to see all of this for the first time? You like, this is all you knew of the world, and then like this whole other world like presents itself to you, to where you would like, you have no idea like how to even contextualize it. And I have a picture of this, of the Spaniards, because the same thing happens essentially at the end. The Spaniards come, the conquistadors, in the boats, and I think it would be like essentially like aliens coming and taking you away, right? Like they just, the technology, it just jumped again, right? And so the two guys chasing Jaguar Paw, they're now in the position that Jaguar Paw was earlier in the movie, by seeing this like super advanced society coming, like these people that look relatively like them, but they're like a little different, you know, they dress different and they maybe speak different, yeah, like I just thought that was an amazing thing. And the story, I think, really revealed itself to me the way it was supposed to when I first saw it. And maybe that's why I have more of an affinity for it. But as we're going, I just want to ask you, what do you think this movie is ultimately about? And I ask this because I think that there's the movie presents like a lot of problems, like a lot of big questions, but it really doesn't have a lot of solutions, right? Like in Braveheart, it's you have to be willing to fight and die for freedom. Passion of the Christ, it's follow Jesus. What's the end of this movie? What does it mean? Like, to start a new beginning? Does that mean we have to go back to a family unit or live more simplistic? Like, I don't know if I really get that sense out of the story, but what do you think?
I don't know. Like a lot of good movies, it's kind of hard to pinpoint what it is. I think one thing that really stuck out with me is the idea of like learning to live without fear. So you're seeing all these you're seeing the end of one civilization and the beginning of a new civilization, an apocalypse, right? And you're seeing all these people succumb to fear and then fall to the wayside. And he was afraid, but he worked through that kind of halfway through, almost a baptism when he's like jumping over the waterfall, right? Like,
yeah,
he was afraid in the beginning, and his father admonished him not to be afraid. And then right before his father was killed in front of him, he also said, "Do not be afraid." And it's him learning to not be afraid and how to live like that. And so this is like the ultimate test of like, okay, we're going to throw an apocalypse at you, or we're going to throw not one new world, but two new worlds. And we're going to put you in danger and your loved ones in danger, and you go through it. And so I think that he's like, well, let's go back to the forest. Kind of what will be, and we'll deal with it when it comes up, because I'm not going to live in fear.
We'll just have to start again. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think at the waterfall scene, I think after he takes his proverbial baptism and is reborn out of the mud, I think he yells to them I'm Jaguar Paw and I'm not afraid. Mm-hmm. And his father tells him, I think this is interesting. He tells them the fear is a sickness, like it's already infected you, and fear makes you rot from inside. Now, when the priest is doing the sacrifices, he says to the people, he says, they say, and I don't know who they is in this context, because there's a whole background to this world that we're not privy to, potentially, unless you know history or something. I don't know. But he said, they say that we are weak. They say that we are empty, which I think is interesting, right? Because the storyteller tells of humans being empty, and they have to keep taking things and bringing them to him. And then he says, they say that we rot. And so what are they rotting from? Fear. They have a fear of losing their way of life, their culture, right? They've expanded too much. They've taken too much because of man's emptiness. And they are fearful that they are going to run out, so they have to like make these sacrifices. They're trying to appease the gods in some way. They're like at their last desperate attempt to solve the problem. And here, they make the sacrifice. He pulls out the heart, which is reminiscent of the tribes people at the beginning after they kill the pig, and they pull out its heart, the pig's heart. I definitely think there's some symbolism there. But yeah, so I think there's definitely a through line of fear of losing your way of life, and can you start again? And I think that's a good thing to suss out. Mm-hmm. Human avarice, kind of touched on, but I think a big one is one culture or society devouring another. First, we like devour nature, and then we have these. Then a bigger society comes and devours us, right? The Mayan devour the tribes people, the Spaniards devour the Mayans, and someday, like, I don't know, something's going to devour us, like something bigger and
Cthulhu?
More advanced. Cthulhu, maybe. It's some sort of aliens or elder gods, potentially.
Right. Well, so I'll tell you how I'm going to fight them when they come with the schlockiest, greatest weapon ever, a beehive.
Oh, man. No one can. Bees, my only weakness.
Just so great. Like, what's he got in there? What's he got in there? Yeah, hit you with the beehive. What's up now?
Yeah, it's so great once this moment comes when he finally like goes on the offensive.
And this is like pure schlock, but also not schlock at all. It's like that weird, like it exists in two worlds because it's part of that area and it makes sense, but it's also just so cool. It's
like it's a really great idea, but it's like really stupid in its simplicity. Right. But again, you see it all, like the whole movie circles back around, right? It ends where it began. And the very final trap, right, is the trap that kills the pig.
So good
at the beginning. So it does show that like simplistic ways, right? The people that shouldn't have any business standing up to like the conquerors, like that they have a chance to potentially fight back in some way. I don't know, and I don't know if that's the theme of the movie, but man, I sure love it.
It's like all great movies that leaves you thinking and lots of room for discussion.
Exactly. Well, I would love to keep talking about this movie, but I do think that we are running out of time. I think we got to celebrate the 4th of July. We gotta think about what our society is, where it's been, and where it's going. But I think we're going to be back again next week with your pick for a movie.
Well, this next week we're actually going to have a real foreign film, Battle Royale.
Oh yeah, pre-Hunger Games, I believe.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I can't wait for it. I am Darby Ellis Lewis Wilson. This is Chris Anonymous, and we've been compelled by Schlock, and we will see you next week. Battle Royale, free on Tubi. Happy Independence Day, everybody. Bye.
Schlock, 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 schlock. Schlocky, schlock, schlock. Schlock. Schlock, schlocky, schlock, schlock. Schlock. I am compelled by Schlock.